Hello, and welcome to another edition of Afternoon Idle. My name is Andrew. I am your host. I am a certified mindfulness meditation coach in the Unified Mindfulness System. You can find out more about at unifiedmindfulness.com. I am many things, but I am not a licensed mental health professional, licensed therapist, or any of those sort of things. But I have been meditating for almost 11 years now, and I can definitely help respond to questions and at least kind of get you on a path towards practice. Today, we are going to do a little bit with a concept called flow. So what we normally do here are what I call contrast sits. So we're contrasting a technique that's implementing some approach with the sort of no technique or the non-technique of do nothing, where we're in essence allowing ourselves to idle in place. And then when we notice ourselves trying to control or orchestrate or manipulate what's going on in our experience, we let that go. And it's a technique that I'm particularly fond of. So it's often, to me, the insights are in the in-betweenness, in between doing something and doing nothing, that helps individuals see when to bear down and do something or implement a technique and get really absorbed, and when to ease up and back off and be able to do nothing. So we'll, in essence, sometimes the contrast will be very, very small, very subtle, like they were yesterday, where we were sitting and knowing that we were sitting and sort of just, in essence, sort of just receiving kind of what was coming in through the senses. Today, we're going to use, I'm going to call it Find Flow, which is not an official, the name of an official technique in the system. But in essence, we're going to be working with, you can think of it as maybe lowercase f flow, not like the flow that is talked about in positive psychology or Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow or flow states. It's a different sort of topic, but in the system, flow is noticing change in activation within our sensory experience over time. So whenever we're doing a technique, we can think of it from a skills-based perspective, that we're training the skills of concentration, clarity, and equanimity. So concentration is the ability for us to place our attention where we want for as long as we want on what we deem important. The clarity part is being able to track in real time what's happening in our sensory experience. So in the interactions of things, the fact that maybe I have an emotional body sensation that's coupled with mental talk or mental image, or all three, or two of the three, and then that leads to something else. It's the ability for us to begin to take these strands of sensory experience and untangle and evaluate them. And then equanimity is our ability to not push nor pull on what's happening in our sensory experience. Very much encourage you to push and pull on your world, being able to stand up for what you believe in, or being able to advocate for others. Pushing and pulling in that regard, totally encouraged. When we talk about equanimity, it's not about being kind of a stick in the mud or happy-go-lucky. It's about allowing what's going on in our body to be there, and to honor that. So it's Jeff Warren refers to it as the inner smoothness muscle. So we're not bracing against things, and then we're, in essence, not being pushed over as well. So, and good morning, good afternoon, potentially good evening if some of our folks are tuning in from the EU, to Sarah and Angie. Hello. So all of those words said, flow really is the ability for us to begin to tune in to that sensory clarity part of those three skills: the concentration, clarity, and equanimity. So we begin to be able to track the changes in what's going on. So what flow may be most, at least from the physical body sensations, when flow may be most available to you is maybe after a workout, after a bike ride, after yoga, maybe after a shower, cold or hot. you may feel that sort of aspect. The reason I mention cold showers is sometimes after you take a cold shower, you will acutely feel the warmth of the edges of your skin and such. And so that's a bit of this lowercase f flow that I'm sort of talking about. So what we'll do in the beginning is just, in essence, when I say find flow, that means that our focus range is completely open. So normally we meet experience in a unified mindfulness technique with applying three broad sensory categories: see, hear, and feel. And so with find flow, I'm just saying if there's flow available in any or all of those categories, you are 100% those are, focus on that. So if you find it and it's available, that's great. So what do we do if we find or we have flow available? Like we do with other noting techniques, we notice where our attention is. We allow our attention to soak into that, and then we can optionally use the label flow as a way to acknowledge and support our attention on that sensation or on that aspect of sensory experience. We can leave the labels out altogether. Labeling is a part of the noting practice, but it is optional. We can also think of it maybe if you're new to noting and labeling, we can think of it as a skillful use of mental talk. But it allows us, almost like we're spotting someone when they're doing a bench press, it allows us to keep the sort of attention in that location, and a little bit of stability at times. And if you're noting things, or if you're noting tracks off, your labeling can sometimes help you realize that you're where you're beginning to get a little bit on the drifting side, away from not being as sharp. Clumsy wording around that. So we'll sit for 15 minutes. You are always welcome to ask questions after or to offer up reports. I do appreciate that. And just as always, if you have a go-to practice that you want to shift into, you're welcome to do that at any point during the practice. So I invite you to adopt a posture that helps you be both relaxed and alert, upright, dignified. And then just checking in with the body. Each of us holds tension in different places, and so you may find that you're more rigid or bracing in different areas. Often when we notice or sort of check in with that, the sensations will begin to relax. And if they don't, it's our first opportunity in this sit to bring a no big deal attitude to what's going on. And then just a few deliberate breaths, maybe 3 or 4. As the Beastie Boys say, slow and low is our tempo. So breathing in slow, breathing out slower if possible, accentuating and elongating that exhale. And in doing that slow in-breath, we begin to fill the lower parts of the lungs. And breathing out slow, we begin to signal to the nervous system that we can flip into a more chilled out mode. And then as we begin with this find flow, if there's any sensations that we can track as changing over time, perhaps the sensations around the breath, but not necessarily the breath, but around the breath. Using the breath would be fine too. And again, our technique is to notice, let the attention soak in, optionally label flow. As we begin, if flow is a new technique, you may find that it's not always accessible. If that's the case, you can move to a home base or just note, feel, or the senses of the physical body in the posture. So one last tip, and then I'll let you explore finding flow. You may notice small or light changes in the senses at the edge of your skin. Maybe at the edge of the arms, the neck. So that may be a place where flow is available. And again, no big deal. Shift to a home base and then it does present itself. And just will be pulled away maybe by sounds or things going on around you. Again, offering a light, no big deal attitude, bringing the attention back to finding flow. So explore this for a while. Okay, so now let that go, regardless if it was positive or you didn't really click with it. Put that behind and shift into this free range stance for our attention, allowing it to go wherever. Letting whatever happens, happens, and dropping any control or implementing any techniques, just letting that just coast. So as we're sitting and we're letting whatever happens happen, just a reminder that we're not actively monitoring for if we're trying to control what's going on. It's just one of those things where if you happen to notice it, then letting it go. So if you've been meditating for a while, you may find that your attention will spontaneously start doing a technique, especially one that maybe you started out with, like counting the breath. I often find myself counting the breath and going, when did I start doing that? So we let that go and keep going. And the fancy bell signals the end of our time together, or in our meditation. I invite you to connect to your surroundings, moving in whatever way you might feel comfortable or intuitive. Just connecting at your own pace. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for spending 20 plus minutes with me. And then again, comments, questions, reports, you can always put those in, I think chat's there. I never know which side, so one of these days I'll remember that. And yeah, and if you have questions, I'll offer a response. I won't be bold enough to say that I'll give you an answer or have an answer, but definitely like to field questions if and when they come up. You're very, very welcome, Sarah. A big thank you to those that have become regulars joining up live. I definitely appreciate that. And we are getting a few folks watching the recorded live streams afterwards. So hello to you as well, if you aren't able to join at the 1 p.m. Eastern time slot. So, oh, interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Angie. So yeah, flow is, as I was I'm repeating myself a little bit from yesterday, but for a lot of individuals who resonate with Shinzen Young's techniques, if you ever do a retreat with Shinzen Young, you realize how many people are using or implementing the flow techniques, or they're working with flow. And they'll talk about that in most of those retreats are silent, or at least the ones that I attended, the 7-day or the 9-day. I think there's a variation that was, at least here in Tucson, it was a 9-day. When folks are reporting or they're talking about their practice, they're often talking about aspects or elements to flow. And so as a newer practitioner, you're kind of sometimes pique your interest, like, well, that's not at all like what my experience is like. And so you develop the sort of sensitivity, the 3 skills I talked about, that we can look at it from a skill. As we sit, we're training these 3 skills. Folks that have been training in Shinzen's system, they have really high sensory clarity. So that means they're able to really detect the nuances of what's going on in see, hear, feel, inner and outer. And so it's interesting to hear reports of folks that have been sitting and going to retreats with Shinzen for 20, 25 years. And so it's kind of mind blowing. So flow is like a complete path in and of itself, I guess, was maybe the better way to put that. So yeah, interesting. So not on and not off, right? And then me being a programmer, I would think of that as, right, you're looking at it from a discrete methods perspective as opposed to binary ones and zeros. And that's 100% where I would say, I don't know that I can get you a link to it, but sometimes when Shinzen talks about flow, he'll talk about it in like calculus stuff of the looking at rates of change over time and things like that. So if you don't know Shinzen Young, he's like, 1, he's a super genius. 2, he's kind of like a polymath. And then the other thing that's of distinction for Shinzen is that he spent significant amount of time training in all three major turnings of the wisdom of Buddhism. So he's done, he ordained as a Vajrayana monk in Japan. He was Sasaki Roshi's translator for more than a decade here in the Los Angeles and Mount Baldy area. And then he practiced with several folks from the Burmese school, that's the noting school that you'll see a lot come up with from a Vipassana perspective. So he studied and did retreats with Uba Kin, and Uba Kin is the teacher of S.N. Goenka, and S.N. Goenka is like the godfather of the 10-day Vipassana retreat. So when someone tells you that they sat a 10-day Vipassana retreat, they're usually telling, that's another way of saying that they went and did a Goenka retreat. And for a lot of folks, like when they think of Vipassana, they're sort of putting together Goenka and that together. So Shinzen has this very vast knowledge across the world of Buddhism, but then he's also someone who's done sun dances with Native American groups and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, he loves to bring the elements of mathematics and physics and everything else into his descriptions of what's going on. So if you haven't delved into the wonderful world that is Shinzen, the Expand Contract channel, and then also Stephanie Nash's Shinzen videos channel have a lot of sort of background stuff. And then shinzen.org is his blog. So I'm always happy to try to, well, I don't know if I can totally explain all the Shinzen's wisdom, but I'm more than happy to point folks to him as well. And if you're looking for a starting point, you can Google, or you can search on YouTube for Google and Shinzen Young. He gave 2 talks at the Google campuses in Mountain View, California, that are I think they're pretty accessible, and they're very, very interesting. So yeah, I echo that what you say here, Angie. I would love to be good at that as well. So another way of looking at flow, the reason I brought up the whole aspect for that is flow is expanding and contracting, or the forces of expansion and contraction are what often are creating that activation within a sense category, or that's one way of looking at it. So you'll at various points in times, depending on what videos and talks, recorded talks from Shinzen, he'll talk an awful lot about expansion and contraction in that. So, but yeah, super cool stuff, but may not be accessible to everybody right away, but it's worth the effort if you dig in a little bit. So we're a little bit past the bottom of the hour. Thank you again for joining, and I really appreciate it. We'll keep playing things by ear about what's going to happen next week. At the very least, I'll have videos released at the 1 p.m. Eastern, 11 Mountain Time. If I can't do things live, but there's a decent chance that I'm not going to be in the mountains like I was hoping, or my girlfriend and I will not be in the mountains like we were hoping. So yeah. So if that's the case, then you'll get to see me live for sure. Or if there's actually Wi-Fi at said cabin, then we will to do that. So have a great Tuesday.